Before the darkness, there was the spectacle. To understand the story that follows, you must first understand who Jimmy Superfly Snuka was to millions of people. Born James Ryer in the Fiji Islands, he brought a completely new and electrifying energy to the world of professional wrestling in the 1970s and 80s. He was not just another big man in tights, he was a force of nature. His style was a breathtaking mix of raw power and astonishing agility. He would climb to the top rope of the wrestling ring, a place usually reserved for smaller, nimbler athletes, and he would soar through the air like a superhero, leaving audiences completely mesmerized and wanting more. His signature move, the Superfly Splash, was a thing of beauty and a masterclass in showmanship. Imagine a muscular, 250-pound man leaping from the highest point of the ring, his body perfectly arched, before crashing down onto his opponent. It was a move that looked both incredibly dangerous and impossibly graceful. Fans would hold their breath every single time, and the roar of the crowd when he landed was deafening. This move helped make him one of the biggest stars in the World Wrestling Federation, now known as WWE. He was a hero to countless children and a larger-than-life figure who seemed to defy gravity itself, a true pioneer of the high-flying style we see so much today. Snuka's appeal went beyond his incredible athletic feats. He had a unique charisma that connected with people on a primal level. He often wrestled barefoot, a nod to his island heritage, and he would communicate with grunts and wild gestures, making him seem like an untamed warrior from a distant land. This persona was carefully crafted, making him seem both exotic and dangerous, yet he was almost always portrayed as a good guy, or a babyface in wrestling terms. People loved him because he was different. In an era of loudmouth talkers, Snuka's quiet intensity and explosive in-ring action spoke volumes, creating a mystique that few could match. His popularity was undeniable, reaching its peak in a legendary feud with Rowdy Roddy Piper. One of the most famous moments in wrestling history involved Piper smashing a coconut over Snuka's head during a talk show segment. This act turned Snuka into a sympathetic hero and made him an even bigger star. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 1996, solidifying his status as a titan of the industry. For a very long time, this was the only story people knew about Jimmy Snuka. The story of a beloved icon, a trailblazer who changed professional wrestling forever. But behind the curtain, a much darker story was waiting to be told. The cheers of the crowd faded away on the night of May 10, 1983. After a World Wrestling Federation taping in Allentown, Pennsylvania, Jimmy Snuka returned to his motel room at the George Washington Motor Lodge in nearby Whitehall. He wasn't alone. With him was his 23-year-old girlfriend, Nancy Argentino. The couple's relationship was known to be intense and volatile, a stark contrast to the heroic image Snuka projected in the ring. What exactly happened inside room 427 that night has been debated for decades, but the outcome was undeniably tragic. What started as just another night on the road for a wrestling superstar would end with a young woman's life cut short. Around midnight, Snuka made a frantic call for an ambulance. When paramedics arrived, they found a horrifying scene. Nancy Argentino was lying in bed, barely breathing. She was gasping for air, and a strange yellow fluid was oozing from her nose and mouth, a clear sign of severe head trauma. Her body was covered in cuts and bruises, more than 24 in total. The first responders knew immediately that this was not a simple accident. They worked quickly to stabilize her and rushed her to a nearby hospital, but the damage was already done. The vibrant young woman from Brooklyn never regained consciousness. Shortly after arriving at Lehigh Valley Hospital, Nancy Argentino was pronounced dead. The official cause of death was determined to be traumatic brain injuries. The autopsy report, a chillingly detailed document, painted a grim picture of her final moments. It concluded her injuries were consistent with her head striking a hard, stationary object. The coroner who performed the autopsy, Dr. Isidore Mihalakis, noted that the pattern of injuries, the numerous cuts and bruises all over her body, was consistent with maid abuse. He strongly suspected foul play and recommended that the case be investigated as a homicide. The medical examiner also made another crucial observation. There had been a significant delay, possibly 12 to 24 hours between when Nancy sustained the fatal injury and when medical help was finally called. This delay, the report noted, very likely contributed to her death. Had she received prompt medical attention, her life might have been saved. This single detail transformed the case from a potential accident into a question of criminal negligence at the very least. The hero of the wrestling ring was now the central figure in a real-life tragedy. and the questions were just beginning to mount. As police began to question Jimmy Snuka about what happened to Nancy, his story seemed to shift and change with each telling. This immediately raised red flags for the investigators present. Initially, in the chaotic moments at the hospital, he told several people, including police officers and hospital staff, that he and Nancy had been fooling around and he had pushed her. He claimed that she fell and hit her head, and that this was all a terrible accident. This version of events, a direct admission of a physical altercation, was the first of many conflicting accounts he would provide over the years, creating a tangled web of contradictions that would haunt the case. Later, when giving a formal statement to detectives, Snuka's story changed dramatically. He now claimed that Nancy had slipped and fallen on her own. He said they had stopped on the side of the highway on their way to the motel so she could use the bathroom, and it was there that she fell and hit her head on the pavement. He said he didn't realize how badly she was hurt until later that night back at the motel. This new narrative conveniently removed him from any direct involvement in her injury, painting him as a concerned boyfriend who simply failed to grasp the severity of the situation. The inconsistency between pushing her and her slipping on her own was glaring. The troubling inconsistencies were made even more disturbing by evidence of prior domestic violence. Just 4 months before her death, in January 1983, Snuka had been arrested at a hotel in Salina, New York. Police had responded to a call and found him dragging Nancy by her hair down the hotel hallway. When officers tried to intervene, Snuka became violent and resisted arrest, requiring several officers and even police dogs to finally subdue him. He was charged with assault and resisting arrest. This was not a secret. It was a documented incident that showed a clear pattern of violent behavior directed at Nancy. In that earlier case, the serious charges against Snuka were eventually dropped. He pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of harassment after Nancy submitted a statement to the court, claiming the whole thing was a misunderstanding and that she was not hurt. Her family, however, told a different story. They had witnessed Snuka's erratic and threatening behavior firsthand and were terrified for her safety. They said Nancy was afraid of him. This history of violence, combined with his shifting stories about her death, suggested that what happened in that motel room was not an accident, but the tragic culmination of a cycle of abuse. Despite the mountain of suspicious circumstances, the case against Jimmy Snuka stalled almost immediately. The coroner had ruled the death a homicide. Snuka had given multiple, conflicting stories about how Nancy sustained her fatal injuries. There was a documented history of domestic violence. By all accounts, there was more than enough evidence to present the case to a grand jury, which would then decide if criminal charges should be filed. Yet, for reasons that remain murky to this day, the district attorney at the time, William Platt, chose not to pursue it. The investigation simply stopped, and the case was officially labeled inactive. One of the most controversial events during this period was a meeting that took place just a few weeks after Nancy's death. Jimmy Snuka, accompanied by the powerful chairman of the WWF, Vince McMahon, met with prosecutors and law enforcement officials. No official record or transcript of this meeting has ever been found, which is highly unusual for a potential homicide investigation. According to reports from those present, McMahon did most of the talking, acting as a spokesman and advocate for his star wrestler. Snuka himself reportedly said very little. Following this mysterious meeting, Snuka was never questioned by the authorities again. The lack of action from law enforcement was baffling. The chief of police in Whitehall Township later admitted that he'd never even seen the full autopsy report, the very document that labeled Nancy's death a suspected homicide and detailed her extensive injuries. This stunning admission suggests a massive failure in communication and procedure within the police department and the prosecutor's office. How could the lead law enforcement agency in charge of the investigation not have the most critical piece of evidence? It fueled speculation that the case was not being handled with the seriousness it deserved, perhaps due to Snuka's celebrity status. This is where allegations of a cover-up began to surface. The Argentino family has long claimed that Vince McMahon and the WWF used their considerable influence to make the problem go away. They alleged that McMahon offered them money to remain quiet and not pursue the case, an offer they said they flatly refused. While there is no definitive proof that McMahon illegally interfered with the investigation, the circumstances were highly suspicious. A star athlete, a dead girlfriend, conflicting stories, and a powerful organization working behind the scenes. For Nancy's family, It felt like justice was being denied because their daughter's life was less important than a wrestling company's bottom line. As the years turned into decades, the official investigation into Nancy Argentino's death just gathered dust in a forgotten file cabinet. Jimmy Snuka returned to the wrestling ring, and honestly, his fame and popularity seemed totally unaffected. He kept performing the Superfly splash, thrilling millions of fans who were, well, completely unaware of the dark cloud that hung over his past. For the public, the incident was barely even a footnote, if they had ever heard of it at all. The wrestling world moved on, and Snuka's legacy as a pioneer, it seemed secure. The tragic night in Whitehall, Pennsylvania, was pretty much erased from the public consciousness, just buried under years of silence. But for the Argentino family, there was no moving on. For them, every day was a painful reminder of the daughter and sister they had lost, and the justice they had been denied. They never stopped believing that Nancy was murdered. Her sisters, Louise and Lorraine, became tireless advocates for her cause, refusing to let her memory fade away. They spent years writing letters to law enforcement agencies, politicians, and journalists, pleading with anyone who would listen to take another look at the case. They were convinced that the initial investigation was a sham, compromised by Snuka's fame and the WWF's influence. The family's quest was a lonely and, honestly, a frustrating one. For a long time, their calls for justice were met with nothing but indifference or bureaucratic red tape. They were just an ordinary family up against a famous celebrity and a powerful corporation. They felt powerless, but they never gave up hope. They kept every newspaper clipping, every document, and every memory of Nancy alive. They spoke about her often, not as a victim in a cold case, but as the funny, loving, and bright young woman she really was. Their persistence was fueled by a simple desire to find out the truth of what happened in that motel room and to hold the person responsible accountable. Their determination was the flickering candle in the darkness of the cold case. While the world forgot, they remembered. They knew that the evidence from 1983, the autopsy report, the conflicting stories, the history of abuse, was still there. They believed that if the right person with the right resources took a serious look at it, the truth would be undeniable. Their unwavering dedication laid the groundwork for the case's eventual reopening. They were the keepers of Nancy's story, ensuring that even after 30 years of silence, her voice would not be lost forever. Their fight was a testament to the power of family love in the face of institutional failure. After nearly 30 years of silence, a crucial breakthrough came from an unexpected place, the local newspaper. In 2013, reporters Andy Mihalchik and Kevin Amerman of the Morning Call in Allentown, Pennsylvania, decided to investigate the cold case for the 30th anniversary of Nancy Argentino's death. They weren't just rehashing old news, they dug deep. They unearthed the original damning autopsy report. They tracked down and interviewed witnesses who hadn't spoken in decades. And they meticulously pieced together the timeline of that fateful night and the deeply flawed investigation that followed. Their work was a powerful example of investigative journalism. The newspaper's detailed exposé brought the case roaring back into the public eye. It laid out all the evidence in a clear and compelling way, shining a harsh light on the failures of the justice system in 1983. The series of articles raised uncomfortable questions that could no longer be ignored. Why wasn't Snuka charged when the coroner suspected homicide? What really happened in that closed-door meeting with Vince McMahon? Why did the police chief never see the autopsy report? The public reaction was one of shock and outrage, and the pressure began to mount on the Lehigh County District Attorney's Office to finally take action. Spurred by the newspaper's investigation and the renewed public interest, the district attorney Jim Martin announced that he was turning the case over to a grand jury. This was the step that should have been taken 30 years earlier. A grand jury is a group of citizens who review evidence in secret to determine if there is enough probable cause to file criminal charges. This process allowed prosecutors to present all the evidence, both old and new, without the statute of limitations getting in the way for a potential homicide charge. For the Argentino family, this was the moment they had been fighting for. The grand jury convened in 2014 and heard testimony from a wide range of individuals. They reviewed the original 1983 autopsy report, which was still as powerful as it was 3 decades prior. They listened to forensic experts who could now provide modern analysis of the evidence. They heard from witnesses who remembered Snuka's conflicting stories and his history of violence. Over the course of a year, the grand jury carefully examined every piece of the puzzle. The silence was finally broken, and the wheels of justice, which had been frozen for so long, slowly began to turn once more. On September 1, 2015, more than 32 years after Nancy Argentino died, the grand jury delivered its decision. Jimmy Snuka, now a frail man in his early 70s, was arrested and charged with third-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. The grand jury's report was scathing. It concluded that Snuka had repeatedly assaulted Nancy Argentino and that his assaultive acts were the direct cause of her fatal injuries. It also stated that his failure to get her medical help in a timely manner was a criminal act that contributed to her death. For Nancy's family, it felt like a long overdue victory. Justice, it seemed, was finally within reach. However, the path to a trial was immediately complicated by Snuka's declining health. His defense attorneys argued that he was not mentally competent to stand trial. They claimed that years of head trauma from his wrestling career, including countless chair shots and his high-flying signature move, had left him with severe dementia and chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. They presented medical experts who testified that Snuka was a shell of a man who could not understand the charges against him or assist in his own defense. He was also battling stomach cancer, which further weakened his physical and mental state. Prosecutors pushed back hard against this claim. They suspected that Snuka might be faking or exaggerating his symptoms to avoid facing a jury. They presented their own expert witnesses and even showed video clips of Snuka from a few years prior, where he appeared lucid and was able to recall details from his career. The judge, Kelly L. Bonnock, was faced with a difficult decision. She had to determine whether Snuka was genuinely unfit for trial, or if he was putting on an act. After months of hearings and conflicting testimony, she made her ruling in June 2016. Snuka was legally incompetent to stand trial. The judge ordered that Snuka's competency be re-evaluated in 6 months, leaving the door slightly open. But by the end of the year, his health had deteriorated even further. He was in hospice care, and doctors gave him only months to live. On January 3, 2017, Judge Bonnock made the final, heartbreaking decision. She dismissed all charges against him, concluding that he would never be well enough to stand trial. 12 days later, on January 15, 2017, Jimmy Snuka died. The case was officially over, with no trial, no verdict, and no legal resolution. After a 34-year fight, justice had slipped through the Argentino family's fingers at the very last moment. Jimmy Snuka's legacy is now permanently split in two. On one hand, he will always be remembered as a revolutionary performer, the man who brought high-flying acrobatics to the mainstream and created some of wrestling's most iconic moments. His influence on future generations of wrestlers is undeniable. Many of today's stars grew up idolizing him and trying to copy his daredevil style. For a certain generation of fans, the image of him leaping from the top of a steel cage at Madison Square Garden is etched into their memories. This part of his story, the celebrated Hall of Famer, can never be completely erased. However, the other side of his legacy is the dark, unresolved story of Nancy Argentino. After his arrest in 2015, the wrestling world could no longer ignore the accusations. The WWE, the company that had made him a star, quietly removed his profile from their Hall of Fame section on their website. They distanced themselves from him, trying to protect their brand from the controversy. Many fans were forced to reconsider their childhood hero. Some defended him, clinging to the idea of his innocence or arguing that his health issues were punishment enough. Others felt betrayed and disgusted, unable to separate the performer from the man accused of such a terrible crime. The case became a major topic of discussion within the wrestling community, especially after it was featured in the popular documentary series Dark Side of the Ring. The show brought the story to a new generation of fans, and laid out the evidence in a way that was hard to ignore. It reinforced the perception that there had been a massive institutional failure in 1983, and it strongly suggested that Vince McMahon and the WWF had played a role in covering up the incident to protect their business and their top star. This has led to a permanent stain on not just Snuka, but on that entire era of wrestling. Ultimately, Snuka's story is now a cautionary tale. It highlights the dangers of celebrity worship and the potential for powerful people and organizations to evade accountability. His name is often brought up in discussions about domestic violence, CTE in sports, and the failures of the justice system. While the WWE eventually restored his Hall of Fame profile after his death, the asterisk next to his name is permanent. He is no longer just Superfly. He is Jimmy Snuka, the man who was charged with murder but never faced a jury, leaving behind a legacy that is forever tainted by suspicion and tragedy. The story of Jimmy Snuka and Nancy Argentino concludes without a clean ending. There was no dramatic trial, no jury delivering a verdict of guilty or not guilty. The legal system, after failing to act for 30 years, ultimately ran out of time. Snuka's death closed the criminal case forever, leaving a void where a resolution should have been. For the public and for the wrestling world, it means the debate over his guilt or innocence will never be definitively settled. It remains a permanent what if, a question mark hanging over the history of a sport built on clear winners and losers. For the Argentino family, the outcome was devastating. After fighting for more than 3 decades, they were denied the chance to see the man they believed killed their sister face a jury. They were denied the opportunity to present their evidence in a court of law and have their story validated by a verdict. While they did win a civil wrongful death lawsuit against Snuka back in 1985 for $500,000, he never paid them a dime, having filed for bankruptcy. The civil judgment was a symbolic victory, but it was not the public accountability they truly sought. The dismissal of the criminal charges meant there would be no official, final answer. The case stands as a powerful lesson about the importance of pursuing justice, no matter how much time has passed. The work of the reporters at the Morning Call and the subsequent grand jury investigation proved that cold cases are not hopeless. Evidence can be re-examined, witnesses can be found, and the truth can be brought to light. It showed that with dedication and public pressure, the failures of the past can be corrected. Even though this particular case did not end in a trial, its reopening sent a message that no one, regardless of their fame, is completely above the law, forever. In the end, the story is not just about a wrestler and a tragedy. It is about a broken system, the power of influence, and a family's unbreakable love. It is about a young woman whose life was cut short and whose story was almost forgotten. While Jimmy Snuka's legacy will forever be debated, Nancy Argentino's is clear. She is a reminder that behind every sensational headline and celebrity scandal, there is a human being whose life mattered. Her family's fight ensured that she would be remembered not just as a victim, but as a person who deserved justice, even if it never fully came.